I'm in the economics department. I do work mostly on using deep learning, using AI to bring in new data to answer questions in the social sciences. So one thing that I've worked a lot on is semantic similarity, and can we use language to say, did these two pieces of writing come from the same source? Can we use language to think about what's a novel concept in academic research? So we've taken a corpus of over 1 billion historical newspaper articles, used that to train a language model that can say, did these two texts come from the same underlying source? Because about half of the content is coming from news wires, and we know what did, and we can do that very accurately. Taken that, applied it to the snapshot of the internet that essentially that most large language models have been trained on, and shown that they did not do a very adequate job of removing duplicated content, noisily duplicated content, and that matters for the performance of the language models. It makes them more likely to reproduce text verbatim, which of course raises a lot of challenges if you're using a language model to write something and you've inadvertently plagiarized someone. And then we've been working with data from JSTOR, data from Elsevier, to say, can we see how similar language is across different domains? What a language model does is it takes your text, which is a series of words, and it maps that into this continuous vector space. So you turn your text into vectors, and then you can do computations with those, right? So like ChatGPT is predicting what word comes next. And so I'm always thinking about similarity of language, originality of language in terms of this vector space, and how dissimilar sort of are these vectors. And I think like the technology exists today, that suppose you wanted to have a plagiarism checker in Google Docs or in Microsoft Word. You could do that, right? You could just measure the similarity of the text that you wrote to whatever corpus that they happen to have. And then it could use the large language model to rewrite that so it's below that threshold similarity, and there's not a problem. But does that make the work any more your own? Not really. It's been rephrased, and I think it's always the case that outright plagiarism is clear, that's not okay. But when we get into this mushy space of has this been sufficiently sufficiently paraphrased, we kind of get into this mushy space. And I think AI changes that, because it can ensure that everything is, sufficiently paraphrased. But does that make the work more your own? I think that's that's sort of the question that probably depends on discipline, right? If you're in economics like me, a big part of what makes your work original and your own has nothing to do with the language, right? It's the regression analysis that you run. And how you describe that, nobody's going to read it anyway. They go straight to the tables, right? And so people, we had a hard time finding a quantitative social scientist for this panel, because we said, have you thought about this? I think largely not, in part for that reason. And so, if somebody is using ChatGPT to paraphrase a description of their statistical method, as long as they ensure that it's correct, people aren't going to care. In the humanities, that might be very, very different, which is a big part of why we wanted to bring people from different disciplines together today.